Senators, when the Senate rose, the Income Tax Amendment Number 3 bill was passed. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to present a bill for second reading, a bill shortly entitled Plea Bargaining. I go ahead. Madam President, the bill before us is the plea bargaining bill. The purpose of the bill is to provide for plea bargaining and post-sentence plea bargaining to enable the Director of Public Prosecutions, the DPP, and an accused person or a convicted person, whether represented by an attorney at law or unrepresented, to engage in plea discussions and enter plea agreements in relation to prosecution of a summary offense, an indictable offense, or an offense triable summarily on indictment. Although plea discussions may occur in practice, St. Lucia does not currently have a statutory framework governing plea bargaining. The bill addresses this gap by establishing a comprehensive and structured process that is subject to judicial oversight. Madam President, the bill authorizes the DPP to enter plea bargaining with an accused person and post-sentence plea bargaining with a convicted person in specified circumstances. Under the bill, Madam President, plea bargaining may be undertaken where an accused person accepts responsibility for an offense, agrees to cooperate with the prosecution, or agrees to provide evidence in criminal proceedings. The bill also permits post-sentence plea bargaining where a convicted person provides or undertakes to provide substantial assistance in the prevention, detection, or investigation of criminal activity, or in criminal proceedings. The bill is intended to facilitate the efficient administration of justice while maintaining appropriate safeguards. It recognizes that cooperation from offenders may assist law enforcement authorities in investigating and prosecuting serious criminal activity, and that in appropriate circumstances, such cooperation may justify sentencing consideration. Madam President, the bill therefore creates a framework through which cooperation may be taken into account by the court while preserving judicial independence and public confidence in the criminal justice system. A central feature of the bill is judicial oversight. A plea agreement does not automatically take effect upon being reached between the DPP and an accused person. I repeat, a plea agreement does not automatically take effect upon being reached between the DPP and an accused person. Every plea agreement must be presented before the court at a plea agreement hearing. The court must be satisfied that the accused person understands the plea agreement and its consequences, that the plea agreement was entered into voluntarily, and that the proposed plea adequately reflects the gravity of the provable conduct. Importantly, the bill expressly provides that a plea agreement is not binding on the court. Importantly, the bill expressly provides that a plea agreement is not binding on the court. The court retains the authority to accept or reject the plea agreement and to determine the appropriate sentence in accordance with the law. Madam President, the bill also contains important safeguards for accused persons. The court is required to inform an accused person of their legal rights, including the right to legal representation and the availability of legal aid. Additional protections are provided for accused persons who elect to proceed without legal representation. These provisions are intended to ensure that participation in plea bargaining is informed and voluntary. The interests of victims are also recognized under the bill. Victims are afforded an opportunity to make representations regarding a proposed plea agreement and to provide victim impact statements. These representations are required to be considered before a plea agreement is finalized. The bill therefore seeks to balance the interests of the accused persons, victims, and the wider public interest in the administration of justice. Madam President, the bill further authorizes the court to impose a lesser sentence where an accused person provides substantial assistance to the prosecution and law enforcement authorities. In determining whether a reduced sentence is appropriate, the court must consider a number of factors, including the significance and usefulness of the assistance, the truthfulness of the information provided, and the extent of the cooperation and any risks faced by the accused person as a result of the cooperation. The decision whether to impose a lesser sentence remains entirely within the discretion of the court. The decision whether to impose a lesser sentence remains entirely within the discretion of the court. Another significant feature of the bill, Madam President, is the establishment of a framework for post-sentence plea bargaining. The bill recognizes that the meaningful cooperation may arise after a sentence has already been imposed. In such circumstances, the DPP may enter into a post-sentence plea agreement with a convicted person. Where appropriate, apply to the court for a review of the sentence. In this regard, the bill creates a limited exception to the doctrine of functus officio. Ordinarily, once a court has imposed a sentence, the court has no authority to revisit that sentence. The bill permits the court, in specified circumstances and upon application by the DPP, to review a sentence notwithstanding that doctrine. This mechanism, Madam President, is intended to provide sentencing consideration for substantial assistance rendered after a sentence to encourage cooperation that may assist in prevention, detection, prosecution of serious criminal activity. I repeat, this mechanism is intended to provide sentencing consideration for substantial assistance rendered after sentence and to encourage cooperation that may assist in prevention, detection, and prosecution of serious criminal activity. Madam President, the bill also establishes rights of appeal in relation to plea agreements, convictions, sentences, post-sentence plea agreements, and decisions made to sentence review. In addition, the bill contains provisions relating to the sealing of records, confidentiality obligations, and the inadmissibility of plea bargaining and post-sentence plea bargaining as evidence in criminal or civil court proceedings. These provisions are intended to preserve the integrity of the plea bargaining process and encourage frank and meaningful plea discussions. In summary, Madam President, the bill establishes a modern statutory framework for plea bargaining and post-sentence plea bargaining in St. Lucia. Madam President, the bill seeks to facilitate the administration of justice by encouraging cooperation with law enforcement authorities while preserving judicial oversight, protecting the rights of accused persons, recognizing the interests of victims, and maintaining public confidence in the criminal justice system. Accordingly, the passing of this bill by this Senate will be a milestone for St. Lucia's judicial system.
Senators, the question is that the plea bargaining bill be read a second time. Senator Norbert.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to support the intent of this bill. I believe it is something that will definitely strengthen the work of the judiciary here in St. Lucia. Madam President, naidi franchement, ça nous a fait après-midi, c'est nous a basically legalize succès et manly decently si préparer assez pour legalize ça. Parce que là nous écouter ces chanter à jouer les radio nous. Ces chanter à dit fire upon informers. Et ces chanter à promote violence contre moun qui aille.
Senator Norbert.
The Creole therapy.
I am shocked, and I think you need to retract this statement, be it in English or Creole. Nou ka legalize succès. Senator, there is no place for that in this House. I am asking you to retract this statement so it could be stricken off the record immediately.
Madam President, I'm trying to find an appropriate word then, because if someone is guilty of a crime and they're convicted, but they could provide information to the police on someone else and they get a lesser sentence.
Senator, I am not the expert on Creole, but I certainly know what succès means. And in this place, in this House, as honorable members, we are not going there. I am asking you again to retract that statement that you made so it could be stricken off the record.
So, nai retract succès, nous pas écouter yo sous ça. Nous retract ça. Nous ka écouter yo mavle di palpata. Nous ka di moun qui bay évidence en les l'autre moun. Oui, common words. Donc, nous ka encourager moun qui fait un crime, si on a information sur l'autre moun pour dire ça yo ni l'autre moun, les ça yo ça non plus easy sentence. Et ça me regarde à manly decently si pas ouais pour ça. Raison on a dit ça. Saint-Lucie c'est un pays qui petit. Tout le monde connaît tout le monde. Et avant yon bay dit nous une phrase qui dit walls have ears. Tout le monde has have qui moun qui dit, qui moun qui bay evidence. I do not believe that our witness protection system is strong enough. I do not believe that our people have the confidence. There is not enough public trust in protection services from the police force. And we have seen that in recent events. So, it is a practice that obtains overseas, and it works, it helps in gathering evidence. But I have my reservations, and these are the reservations that I have expressed here this afternoon. The solution is to ensure that we do everything we can to restore trust in the system, restore trust in the police force, restore trust in our judiciary, our lawyers, our judges. As long as we have St. Lucians to trust the system, all of these plans will work well. And so everything we do, with every scandal, with every accusation, we must bear in mind that our actions affect the trust of the people out there. And if Parliament is the guardian of the Constitution, the guardians of the laws, Parliament will be the guardians of this bill that we are passing here today. When it's enacted, I heard about judiciary oversight. How much parliamentary oversight will there be? Will a report be tabled at the end of the year in terms of the number of persons who were granted pardon or their sentences reduced, or by how many years? How much, not control, I'm not asking for control, but how much oversight will Parliament have over this? How much information will come back to us so that we determine how this law is working in the favor of the people of St. Lucia? At the end of the day, I know some believe it's utopian, but we sing of our ideals. We pledge our ideals. Justice. Everyone wants justice and equality for all. So let's work together to strengthen our systems so that the public can trust the government of St. Lucia and trust this law that we are going to be enacting this afternoon. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Senator Fede.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a few comments on the bill presented by the Leader of Government Business this afternoon. Madam President, no doubt anything that we can do to help reduce the very concerning crime situation in our country is going to receive support from the opposition. Madam President, I have seen and I have read where this particular instrument has been very helpful to a number of jurisdictions in leading to more, I guess, substantive criminals, if you want to use that phrase. And it is used especially in scenarios whereby, I guess, people that are on the lower end of the value chain of criminals may lead to the bigger bosses, if you will. Is that a good word? Yeah. So, Madam President, the bill, though, and I heard the Leader of Government Business where he has said that the plea agreement is not binding on the court. So if, for example, the DPP makes an agreement with someone for a plea arrangement for a lesser sentence, that the court does reserve the right to apply the appropriate sentencing that the judge may deem necessary. That gives me some level of comfort. But the bill, though, Madam President, what concerns me is the circumstance, the background that surrounds the bill. It comes, Madam President, at a time when the island is going through a crime crisis, if you will. Burglaries are high, incidents of other crimes, homicides, Madam President, is alarmingly high, and it has been high for the last 10 years or so, where the country hasn't been able to overcome the high incidence of homicides, where we see particularly a lot of young people losing their lives to gunshot wounds, where they appear to be as a result of the proliferation of gangs, young men forming themselves into gangs in our communities. So, Madam President, I think that a plea deal can certainly, or any instrument that will help plea bargaining, will certainly help to curtail some of these concerns that we do face at this present time. Madam President, it might also help the backlog of cases that we have in our country, rather than the long system of going through very significant trials that may take an inordinate amount of time. Maybe it can help the current backlog of cases, although we should not depend on plea bargains alone to solve the current backlog of cases. But where we've heard, Madam President, people in the justice system complain a whole lot about the backlog of cases, which has been identified as one of the stumbling blocks in the way of us solving the crime situation. As a result of this, Madam President, we have a number of inmates on remand awaiting trial. Some may say that this is an injustice and a violation of the rights of those individuals who sometimes for years have not been able to get trial. Madam President, and my colleague here did raise an important point, which is that the witness protection system must be effective so that the plea bargaining system can work. If people are going to feel, I don't know the word to use, but if people are going to feel that somehow telling another or giving valuable information on someone who would have been part of the same gang or company or cause of committing crimes, or criminal elements as part of the same network, if one of those criminal elements that might be part of a plea arrangement or a plea agreement, for that to work, then that person must feel very, very safe. And so the stories that we are hearing today about the lack of witness protection, the vulnerability of people feeling unsafe in even showing up for trial, much less those that are not part of plea arrangements, it would mean, Madam President, and it would suggest that the legislation by itself will not work, and we will need to do a lot more work in the area of witness protection so that we can help to make this a reality. You see, very often we come to the House and we pass bills, and we believe that the legislation by itself is going to necessarily cure the problem that we're seeking to address. So, but there ought to be other accompanying systems, other accompanying policies and measures that we take that will help to curb the situation or address the policy that we are trying to address. So, Madam President, the point of witness protection is absolutely crucial. Too often we hear that people, when making complaints to the police, they skip town. They have to leave the country. I mean, quite recently, we've had a popular case reported on the news where the complainants have actually had to skip town because of fear for their safety, Madam President. And it really depends on who the person is giving the information on. When individuals are entering into plea arrangements, so all this ought to be considered. The trust of the judicial system, and now by this I mean the trust of police officers and the police force, is absolutely crucial for this to work as well. That individuals must feel that if they make certain information available to law enforcement officials, investigators, that that information is safe and that information will not be shared in any way, exposing them to danger. So, Madam President, it's a very important bill, but by itself, it is just the beginning, and there is so much more that needs to go in to make it work. Thank you.
Senator Preble?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I will I rise to speak to make a contribution on this very important bill, and I take my cue from my colleague senators who have spoken before me. And I have taken note of the presentation and elucidation provided by the leader of government business. Madam President, I am not a lawyer, and I recognize a number of the issues are fairly legal. So my comments this afternoon will really be comments focused on ensuring that the draft, the bill we have before us, considers carefully some issues of concern that we should bear in mind, and we should therefore be able, as a Senate, to balance whether what we have before us adequately address some of what I consider challenges that come with plea bargaining bills in general. So to the extent we could perhaps pay attention to what we have, the draft before us, and what generally plea bargaining bills should seek to ensure, the protections they should seek, or the shortcomings that can result from poor bills. Perhaps the debate here would be worth our time. So, Madam President, one of the reasons why we have plea bargaining bills is to, in some instances, deal with where we have a backlog of cases. So where we have a backlog of cases, persons may wish, as we do have in this case, and I recognize the government has established a special court to deal with a backlog of cases. But this is one of the situations where you find that plea bargaining legislation can be used to speed up, as it were, the judicial process. It is a conceptual concern because it can shift the criminal justice system from proving guilt beyond reasonable doubt to negotiating acceptable outcomes. And that's a very important thing. So while we may want to deal with cases that have been outstanding, we must be careful not to have legislation that encourages speed at the expense of what should be correct. There is also something we need to pay additional attention to. Madam President, in circumstances where we have persons entering into plea agreements, there is usually a power imbalance between the prosecution and the accused. And therefore, because that imbalance can be substantial, the prosecutor normally has much greater bargaining power or control over the charges, has access to the evidence, the ability to use a strong word, threaten concessions, or to threaten or offer concessions. A good plea bargaining bill, therefore, needs to be very strong on the safeguards against coercive charge bargaining. For example, charging an accused with a much more serious offense in order to induce a plea to a lesser offense. So we have to be careful that even as we look at this bill, that we do not see room or space in there for what we call coercive charge bargaining. This is important, Madam President, because at the end of the day, what we want is to ensure that the purpose of this bill is to facilitate and encourage justice, not injustice. This is very, very important. Now, we have heard, and my colleagues spoke about victims being protected in our very small environment. When a person enters a plea, for want of a better word, a deal with to get a lesser sentence, there is a victim involved. There is someone against whom a crime has been committed. And the question now becomes, is the crime that the person who is guilty, or who is charged, I should use that word because a decision has not been reached, the person who is charged, is that person, because of the plea agreement and the negotiation which has taken place, is that person going to be charged with a lesser crime than the one for which the victim has suffered? And therefore, we need to be careful that the victim does not get treated with a lesser crime, meaning the victim gets justice for the crime that was committed against that victim. It is important that this is done, because if we have a system which in any way allows for the perpetrator of the crime to get away for a lesser charge than was what was committed, then the victim now becomes the one who does not receive the justice for what was perpetrated against that person. I think, Madam President, that as we look at this draft before us, as senators, we must be satisfied in ourselves that that draft protects the victim carefully in this bill. So a good system should therefore give victims timely notice of proposed plea agreements, should do that, should opportunity to express their views, victims should have that, access to all relevant information, a meaningful victim impact process. And I note this is definitely covered in this particular draft. It is covered here. And I say, Madam President, this discussion, debate we're having here, is not a debate for or against the proposed draft. The debate we're having here is to ensure that the draft, that proposed bill, takes into consideration and provides for the circumstances and challenges that can emerge from a plea bargaining bill. Judicial oversight needs to be genuinely independent. Any plea bargaining bill needs to ensure that judicial oversight is independent. And as we look at the existing draft before us, we have to be reasonably satisfied that that is the case. Because one of the most important safeguards is for the judge to have the power to reject a plea agreement. Yeah? That is important. And to the extent that our draft treats with that properly, I am comfortable. And so I am highlighting, Madam President, some of the concerns that the ordinary citizen would have with a plea bargaining bill that they're hearing about. They would need to be satisfied that these concerns are adequately addressed. A very worrying thing, and again, I'm sure the leader of government business is taking notes, and he will most likely rebut to some of the issues raised here, is what we call sentencing discounts can produce inconsistency. What do I mean by that? If the bill encourages guilty pleas by offering sentencing reductions, there needs to be a clear framework governing how much credit is available and for what stage. So otherwise, two accused persons who commit essentially the same offense could receive dramatically different sentences simply because one negotiated earlier and had a more effective lawyer. So we want to ensure that when we have a draft like this, a plea bargaining bill like this, we are protecting and ensuring that there is no inconsistency in how one is treated, the same crime is treated because one party was able to negotiate, had a better lawyer, was able to negotiate a better deal than the other. So, Madam President, we cannot debate those very important pieces of documentation without having consideration, without ourselves being satisfied, because I've always said the Senate here is the last barrier between good laws, which help the entire society, and bad laws, which will impact the entire society. So to the extent that we are the last guardians, the last guardrails in the laws that will become binding on all St. Lucians, it is incumbent upon us to make sure we take time to look at the legislation carefully, to satisfy ourselves completely that some of those, and in this case the plea bargaining bill here, some concerns are adequately addressed. Madam President, I will not go through an exhaustive list of challenges, but I have identified some of these as some of the more important ones that we need to pay attention to. Also, we need to be mindful that we should never allow plea bargaining to be a plea bargaining bill to encourage or cause innocent people to plead guilty. We should never let a plea bargaining piece of legislation encourage innocent people to plead guilty. And why would that happen? Because you see, that could be a very serious human rights concern. A person who is actually innocent may plead guilty where, and I'm using a typical phrase where if you plead guilty you may get X. If you go to trial and lose, you receive Y. The greater the difference between X and Y, the greater the pressure to accede to a plea. Simply put. So we do not want to have legislation that impacts our people in a manner where people might be might want to plead guilty just because they say, if I have a bad lawyer and I go to court and I happen to lose, here is the cost to me, meaning I might spend how many years in jail. I am innocent, but I have a bad lawyer. I don't have the means. So it might make more sense to me to plead guilty and get a lesser charge than to proceed if the judicial system. And so it comes down to a number of issues. It comes down to the capacity of the accused to be able to get full representation. It comes down to the level of trust we have in the prosecutorial system, that the persons who will be doing the negotiation, they are doing it in good faith. So these are concerns, these are real concerns, Madam President, that as we debate this bill, we need to be very comfortable in our own selves that the current draft gives us the level of protection and comfort that allows us to say the ayes have it when the question will be put. So, Madam President, with these words, I would like to thank you for your opportunity to allow me to contribute to this discussion.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a few comments on the bill. As has been noted by my colleague senators who have spoken before, this is a fairly powerful piece of legislation, and I guess another tool in the arsenal of the justice system to ensure that matters are dealt with fairly and quickly to speed up the process of things. I listened to the concerns expressed by Senator Preville, one or two of which I share, but I do believe that this bill is fairly robust in trying to establish some guidelines and some guardrails on the way in which the plea bargaining system is going to be used. So if I take it, starting first with just the ordinary plea bargaining system. So as we traditionally understand it, somebody has been charged with a crime and the opportunity arises where through their attorney, or if they're unrepresented through themselves, they can discuss with the Director of Public Prosecutions or an authorized prosecutor an arrangement whereby they plead guilty and gain a sentence, or a sentence, sorry, is then imposed on them. To sort of assuage the concern that the Senator Previll had about and it is possible prosecutorial misconduct is a thing. It happens worldwide. It's not something that would necessarily be unique to St. Lucia. And I know it does, especially in some of the metropolitan countries that do have plea bargaining, it is a concern that persons are often pushed into accepting a plea because of the jeopardy that's hanging over their head. But I note that the Act does make provision for you to approach the court for a sentencing indication, which allows you basically to get an independent party to say this is what is likely to be if the matter is proven against you, and I am to impose sentence based on the sentencing guidelines, based on the considerations and the facts that are in this matter. This is the sentence that you are likely to face. So at least you have somebody outside of the prosecutor showing you or giving you an indication of what jeopardy you're actually facing. And I believe that's a very important provision, because it is introducing some element of objectivity. So it's not just the prosecutor and the accused that are involved in the process and discussing what may or may not occur. The concern that Senator Previll raised about prosecutors imposing or seeking to levy more serious charges, knowing full well that they can't achieve it, in the hope that you then plead to a lower offense, is a real concern. I note that there is an attempt to address this, but I'm not sure that the drafting is sufficiently robust. I'm just looking for the section, which is at section 6 of the Act, which speaks to the Director of Public Prosecutions shall not enter into a plea bargaining that requires an accused person to plead guilty to an offense that A, is not supported by a reasonable prospect of conviction based on the evidence. So in other words, where they've charged you in an offense that there's no possibility of them successfully convicting you for, you can't enter into a plea bargaining agreement, or does not adequately reflect the gravity and provable conduct of the accused person, which I think is another way of saying the same thing, that if the evidence against you does not justify the offense at which you've been charged, then you cannot enter into a plea bargaining agreement. So I think that addresses or seeks to address the concern that Senator Previll has raised. Whether it will do so in practice is something I think we do need to monitor and ensure that once this goes into effect, piece of legislation goes into effect, that there are reviews and constant engagement with it to ensure that it is achieving the ends that it is meant to. The real concern that I have surrounds the post-conviction plea bargaining agreements, which I think is a little unusual. And I understand what Senator Norbert was trying to say earlier. And this is where I think that concern really arises, because it allows you, having been sentenced, to then decide, okay, well, I am going to give information, because it's not just on co-accused, but it allows you to give evidence or assist, and I'll put assist in inverted commas, with any investigation and for any offense. So I think that, and then as a result, to obtain a reduced sentence. I think this is somewhere we need to be a little bit careful, because it does raise the possibility that you can have unscrupulous persons who decide that I'm going to give a story to the police in the hopes of getting a reduced sentence. So I've already been convicted, but all of a sudden now I have information regarding XYZ crime, and I'm the star witness, and I'm the one who's able to go on the stand, give evidence, and get this person convicted. I'm not sure that this is really what we should be aiming for, and I'm not sure, I'm not a drafter, so I'm not sure exactly what additional guardrails we can establish to ensure that that sort of misconduct, either by the prosecutor approaching somebody who's convicted and suggesting to them that they give evidence and assist to achieve a certain end, or an unscrupulous convict similarly deciding that I'm going to concoct a story to assist me in getting a lower or reduced sentence. I note as well that the Act makes provision that the fact of the existence of a plea bargaining agreement is something that is supposed to be kept confidential. And again, I raise that particularly as it relates to a post-conviction plea bargaining agreement. To me, in that circumstance, if I am an accused who is facing a witness who has entered into such an agreement, that is information that I want to know. Because I need to be able to challenge the credibility of the witness and why it is that all of us, because it may be a situation where all of a sudden a long outstanding, long unsolved matter suddenly gets solved because this star witness happens to come up with evidence. And we must always make sure that when we are legislating for the worst case scenario, not the best case scenario. And whereas I'm generally comfortable with the Act as a whole, the post-conviction plea bargaining arrangements are where I think there is an opportunity for persons to misuse and abuse this Act, and we need to be very careful in that regard. Thank you, Madam President.
Should I pose a question? Oh, Senator Charles.
Always seem to be missing me, Madam President. Just to follow up on my colleague, Madam President, we have to realize that not all solutions that are implemented in other countries can apply to ours without adapting it. Because there's a high level of, in small societies like ours, there's a high level of suspicion and superstition. And because we are so close to each other, and I think I was a bit taken aback, like yourself, at the language of introduction by Senator Norbert. I do sympathize with him because I understand the intent of what he wanted to say. However, I think we have to be mindful that legislation like this does not breed a cadre of professional, what I call professional cooperants. People who have become so adept at assisting that it becomes part of their craft. But I get the big picture that we're trying as best as possible to address some of the systems of some of the shortcomings of our justice system. Because too often you hear people have been held in remand for years. And if they had this kind of opportunity, that could have been shortened. But my suggestion to leader of government business, to the government, is careful attention in communicating the intent of the legislation to the public. It is not about squealing on anybody. It's about cooperating with the justice system to ensure that we speed up justice and there is justice for all. So I think we will have to step back a bit, look at the legislation, look at the implications and some of the concerns raised by colleagues in the Senate to address some of these concerns before we probably go full speed ahead in implementation. And certainly, Madam President, nous avons bien chaisa koyol parce que pour raison ça sénateur Norbert teni problème manière ka expliquer ça loi intention loi the intention of the law. So you have to choose, because the language, the Creole language itself is very complex. And you have several terms to describe one thing. And you know that. So there's sometimes you have to step back and carefully choose your words before you go out and start to speak. And I think the same thing has to be done in trying to explain this piece of legislation to the public. But having said this, Madam President, I think the intent is honorable, and I'm hoping that it will solve some of the the problems we have in dispensing justice in St. Lucia. I thank you, Madam President.
Senator Dr. Harksing.
Madam President, I rise in support of this plea bargaining bill, and I wish to lend my voice to its enactment. The bill before us is to establish a statutory framework that is subject to judicial oversight. So that, to me, is the most important part of this bill, the judicial oversight. And I just want to allay the fears of Senator Previll. So I'll give a quick summary of basically what this is. So the Director of Public Prosecution, he has these plea bargaining discussions with an accused person or a convicted person, okay? And during this time, the person can either have an attorney present or decide that they do not want to have an attorney present. And that is for them to, if the person, the accused or the convicted, if they decide, okay, I want to accept responsibility for the offense, then that can happen during that time. If they want to cooperate with the prosecution, that can also happen. But even if they've come to an agreement, it is not automatic that this is what it is. What then happens is that they go into a plea agreement hearing. So during this time, so this is where the courts now come in. So when you were saying that you were very concerned that people may be coerced, the courts are deciding and they're ensuring that there has been no coercion and that the accused or the convicted fully understands what agreement that they've come into with the DPP. Also, you were speaking about the victims, and this has also been addressed in this bill. So the victims can provide a victim impact statement, and these are taken into consideration when the court decides whether they're going to accept the plea agreement or not, whether it's going to become a plea agreement. So the accused, the victims, if they've presented a statement, and the wider public, all of these things are taken into account when the agreement is done by the courts. In terms of the post-sentence plea bargaining, we've got the doctrine of functus officio. So there's a limited exception to it. Usually when the court has imposed a sentence, the court has no authority to revisit that sentence. But in this bill, what happens is that under certain circumstances, they can revisit it and then they can, in effect, get a lesser sentence if it is, if this is what is intended. So I'm hoping that I have allayed your fears, Senator Previll, and I do give my full support to this bill.
Leader of Government Business? Oh. Senator Ditterville?
Thank you, Madam President. I just stand in support of the plea bargaining bill before us this afternoon and would like to address, thank you, sorry. Again, to address some of the concerns, not repeating what has been said, but just going back to what Senator Fede brought up as a concern that he had in terms of the backlog and the fact that the government, it would not have been enough of a venture for the government to depend only on the plea bargaining bill to eliminate backlog. If we remember a few sessions ago in this House where we discussed or spoke about the backlog court, and the purpose of that court is to be able to deal with matters that have not been dealt with, and we very often hear justice delayed is justice denied. And so the government, in its wisdom, has brought in a backlog court to deal with those matters that are outstanding for a long time. That's at the back end. In the front end to our system, this plea bargaining bill will also assist in that regard, in terms of us not having that lengthy process. Notwithstanding, this doesn't in any way eliminate from or suggest that there are any cutting of corners, because you could tell that there are a lot of, there are quite a few things that have been implemented to ensure that due process is observed and that it's not left in the hands of the DPP. The court still has jurisdiction over the matter to decide fairness of the procedure. So I think that is very important in addressing what many of us, not only the senators here, but what many persons may suggest or may have questions about in terms of how the accused or not yet accused may approach this bill. And so in terms of the backlog court, that is one of the procedures or some of the things that the government has implemented, as well as because of those initiatives, we also have to understand that we are going to also be shortening the time and resources, our human resources, in terms of the amount of time that maybe would be spent in trials. Trials sometimes take a long while, and this will also assist in us in being able to get a lot of the matters through the court system in an effective, very effective way. Something else that I want to make reference to is the role of the victims. A lot of times in situations where a plea bargain may be an option, there's a perception that the victims are forgotten. I think this bill does justice to that, where it is mandatory that the victims or the family of the victims, if the victim is deceased, has an opportunity to give information or to even suggest or to let the court know how they have been impacted, how the families have been impacted, and so the victim has a voice. It's not that, the person may no longer be with us and so they're forgotten. They are part of the process, included in the process, and I think we need to make note of that, and I think that's a very commendable step to allow the victim to play an active role in this process. Again, I give my support to this bill. I hope that we are able to alleviate some of the fears that some of the senators have, and I'm hoping that as senators, obviously that may be the concerns of some of the persons who are listening, and that they are now aware and a little more comfortable in terms of what is provided in this bill. I think it's a solid piece of legislation, and it does cover a lot of areas that would have brought concern to many. And I think the drafters have been able to address a lot of those issues. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Dr. Poyot.
Yes, Madam President, I rise in support of the bill, which speaks to a plea bargaining. And Madam President, I may give the discussion a different twist in that my colleague senators have elaborated, including the leader of government business, on the purpose of this bill and how that bill will be effected and applied based on the way it was crafted. And knowing the intention of this legislation, it is in keeping with the government's policy in addressing the issue of crime, and we have a unit for crime prevention, the issue of national security and justice. And in keeping with the Prime Minister's strategy in providing security for the citizens of St. Lucia, there are several areas that are necessary to address security, address the issue of crime and justice in the country. Therefore, I find this plea bargaining bill to be a necessary tool as part of the structure and the process in bringing about justice and prevention or ensuring that we reduce crime in the society. Ek mwen vle di bay St. Lucia, nou ka pale an pil about crime, avec nou sav son bagay ki ka kontwaye Premier Minister. It is a problem for the Prime Minister, it's a problem for the Cabinet, it's a problem for the state. Although sometimes people tend to count on their fingers how many murders and everything as if they are about to celebrate. But this is not something we should celebrate, Madam President. It is something that we have to find ways and means of resolving in our country. And this bill, the plea bargaining bill, is a step in the direction where, having been a Minister of Home Affairs and working very closely with persons who have been convicted, especially at the Borderley Correctional Facility, I understand why the government will find it necessary to find ways to resolve crime, to reduce the number of inmates that we have at Borderley, and then to create a society that is safer for persons to live. And the bill was carefully crafted as articulated by Leader of Government Business to address some of the concerns that are raised. And as we said, sometimes some things in theory may not be in practice. But I trust that before this bill was brought to the House, that the government would have looked at what exists in other jurisdictions, what are some of the other and best practices, and felt that it was necessary that we introduce this component in our judicial system. Madam President, in our deliberations looking at security and justice, I can reveal that persons who have been convicted, some of them, we cannot question the law because we have authorized the law to exercise their authority. But some people would tell you that they have been in Borderley. Government spends heavy taxpayers' money to feed these people and take very good care of them, Madam President. And they have behaved very well, Madam President. Yet they cannot find a way out. Sometimes they could be of assistance to the law enforcement officers to resolve other crime. And maybe some people don't know the role that Borderley plays in resolving crime in the country. Borderley is a microcosm of the society. Every single aspect that you see in the country exists at Borderley. It's a country by itself. And the persons there are very useful, very informative, and they can play a very good role in resolving conflicts and resolving some very serious cases. But some people might say, why do I have to give information? What is in it for me? What do I get back? And maybe that may be one of the reasons for the plea bargaining, that the DPP can enter into some discussion to do some further probing to assist in resolving some cold cases, some serious cases. And therefore, I trust that this bill will take us one step closer in ensuring that there is justice. Madam President, the other area that the government has explored, and it was mentioned by my other senators here, Senator de Turville, leader of government business, dealing with the backlog court, where about 48 cases have been dealt with in a very short space of time. And some people say justice delayed is justice denied. And at Bodoley, as we speak today, Madam President, we have 541 inmates at Bodoley. 250 are penal, and 281 are on remand. We have the female, 4 are penal, and 6 are on remand. And that tells you 1.8% of inmates at Bodoley are females, and 98.15% are males. So all what we're doing about penal bargaining, we're exploring what are the issues in our society to deal with justice. Will penal help? Will we have the Mercy Committee? When I was minister responsible for Home Affairs, I used to get letters on my desk on a regular basis. People are saying they have been behaving very well. They have been there for 20 years. They have their family, they have their children. When will they be released? But the court has ruled that you are sentenced for life, or for 40 years or 80 years. Nobody can take you out. And for that matter, Madam President, we also have the Board of Visiting Justice. These are people who do independent oversight of what's happening at Bodoley to ensure that correctional officers and persons in charge of management are treating the inmates right. Things are correct. They are in a good working condition. I'm raising that, Madam President, to indicate that we are taking several measures to address the issue of justice, to address the issue of crime in the society. And the plea bargaining is just one of those measures, just one of them. They were also exploring the halfway house. How do we reintegrate inmates into the society? And so far, there are some progress that has been made in this direction. We have issues relating to, as the Prime Minister said in his budget debate looking at justice in the country, this plea bargaining is based primarily on voluntarism on the part of the accused. They have to volunteer to be part of the process. Nobody will force them to go into it. They must be willing to cooperate, to assist in exploring ways of resolving not just their case, but in other cases. Therefore, they are supporting the justice system. If they have to get a lesser sentence in the eyes of the judicial system, so be it. That will not be manipulated by ordinary people, not by politicians, not by citizens. As was mentioned by Senator Preville, we have to take into consideration the victim. How do they see a plea bargaining? Do they see it as a form of injustice for them if there is a reduction in sentence? But as Senator Preville said, he hoped that there is fairness in the whole plea bargaining and some people are not treated unfairly. And it's not because some people have good lawyers and others do not have good lawyers. Madam President, there are persons who have been spared the acts of the justice system on technicality. At the end of the day, would you say the person with the very good lawyer, that means whoever, if it's a murder case, that means the person is no longer dead because you escape free, the person is still dead. So in giving a sentence, even the judge, some people question whether the judge gave the right sentence for a particular case. And the victims are grieving because they have lost a loved one. Every life is important, every life is significant. And as a result, we have to ensure that we work more on prevention. Most time we talk about the care and the cure, and that may not come. So let us try and see how we can prevent these things from happening, Madam President. And there is judicial oversight, as mentioned by Senator Haraksin. It is not something that will be done loosely. And this is what the House is for. If this legislation is applied and we find it's not serving its purpose, we bring it back here and we amend it. We change it to suit our environment. And that's why there is adoption and adaptation. And if there are things that have worked well in another country, it may not work well here, but we can adapt it to suit our local environment. And for this reason, I see that as a very positive step in addressing the issue of crime, the issue of national security, and the issue of justice in this country. And therefore, Madam President, I lend my full support to this bill, and let us hope that it will be implemented in a very efficient, effective, and expeditious manner. I thank you, Madam.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to thank colleague senators for their contributions thus far and in supporting the bill as we seek to address the matters of crime prevention and improvement and transformation of our justice system. Madam President, we note the concerns expressed by senators, but therein I think we have had some explanations by independent senators and our two legal counsel who are senators on some of the concerns. One of which, on page 13 of the bill, section 8.1, that is the procedure at the initial hearing of an accused person. At the initial hearing of an accused person, the court shall inform the accused person. And it goes on to say of his or her right, the right to presume innocence until proven guilty, the right to plead not guilty, the right to trial by judge alone, right to trial by judge and jury, etc., etc. And then we go on to the section 2. When an accused person enters plea bargaining without representation, the court shall, before approving plea bargaining, satisfy itself that the accused person, A, understands his or her rights under subsection 1, B, is fit to enter plea bargaining, and C, understands the nature and consequences of plea bargaining, Madam President. So I think careful consideration was given to a lot of the concerns in here. But I wouldn't want to dwell into reading the entire bill, Madam President, and I would still urge members to do that, to read the bill properly and to see for themselves the caution that has been taken. But we still note those concerns. And I did say when I made the presentation that a plea agreement does not automatically take effect upon being reached between the DPP and the accused, and I did repeat that. And I also said every plea agreement must be presented before the court at a plea bargain, a plea agreement, the court must be satisfied that the accused person understands the plea agreement and its consequences, and that the plea agreement was entered into voluntarily. That was said, Madam President. And so we have seen the government of St. Lucia has done quite a bit, and as indicated, it is a multi-pronged approach in trying to treat with the issues of crime prevention and improving our justice system. And so there is no one thing that will work. I don't think this is the panacea for solving a lot of the issues that we have. But it is adding to our arsenal of treating with this crime situation that plagues our society and is causing, and any government and any political organization that will think that we have the solution, we don't, and we should not, and we have tried not to make it or politicize the issues of crime. It is a concern for all of us in this society because we all must live, work, play, recreate in this space, and a safe space for our families today and for generations to come. And so this is another step in that direction. Madam President, I listened to the opening statements or remark by Senator Jeremiah Norbert. Sorry, Elisha Norbert. I wouldn't be forgiven by the other Norbert minister. My apologies. I think he was trying to find il te ka chercher un premier mot pour dire ça il te ka dire. En créole, avec mot ça là était ça servi. Là où on caille concept, on y pour parler différents qualités de langage. Là où bokabawe, on caille servi différents qualités mots. Mais là où on dit dans caille concept, ou supposé servir un mot comme informateur. Eh bien, un monde qui a vendre les autres, ça a plus meilleur pour servir ici. Alors, moi, ça dit ça en anglais pour l'autre.
Madam President, I rise on a point of order.
What is your
Madam President, Standing Order 37.8 says the conduct of Her Majesty, members of the Royal Family, the Governor General, members of the Privy Council, or the Senate, in this case, Senator Elisha Norbert, or of the House of Assembly, or of judges, or of other persons engaged in the administration of justice, shall not be raised except upon a substantive motion moved for the purpose and in any amendment questioned to a minister or debate on a motion dealing with any other subject. Any reference to the conduct of any such person, as aforesaid, including senators, shall be considered out of order. Yes. I wanted to rise when Senator Charles did it as well. That's true. So I just bring this to your attention, Madam President, that this is being violated.
Senator, I need to speak to this. It was not about the conduct. The senator spoke to the use of the language by Senator Norbert. I am speaking. The use of the language in the Senate, which was inappropriate, and I called him up to retract it. I have ruled, I have decided, and the senators chose to speak to it because they too were probably shocked. So it's not about the conduct. It was the use of the language that Senator Norbert used, which was inappropriate and should not have been. That's what they spoke to. Okay?
Yeah. Good night. Senator Jean. Yeah.
Proceed.
Let me ask you a question.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Ça m'a été Madame Présidente. Si on est dans ici, nous avons cherché pour l'autre mot pour ça, ou aider sénateur à ce manière pour te parler, ça a été voulu dire. Mon code dit à rien, vous connaissez mot ça là, rien. Eh bien, Koudi, ma ka parler à sous affaire Koudi, moi cadeau manière pour comporter comme en dedans ici, ou te ça servi un mot comme informateur, et bien, vous voulez dire c'est moun là qui vend les autres. Ah, pareil comme ça. Ça
Senator Norbert. Your light was on.
Yes, Madam President, I wanted to rise on a point of elucidation, but he already said the words Van les autres. He said it earlier, so I wanted him to repeat it, but he already answered me. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Merci un pile. Et puis l'autre côté, Madame Président, là dans dictionnaire ou ça joindre sur internet là, ou pas pour payer des sous pour lui et que ça aller lire ou ka joindre tous ces mots pour ça servir le ka parler créole. Bon pour les autres là qui pas comprendre ça moi ka dire. What I was saying is this, that there are other words that can be used of choice, and I was not insinuating anything towards the conduct of or insinuating any improper motive by the senator. So I am speaking to the bill, and you cannot instruct me. I have the floor now, sir, and the president will tell me when I have to sit. Bon, si on y a un problème, on peut prendre bago et on peut partir courir descendre la slawe. C'est ça moi qui dis là pour à présent. Bon, yes, Madam President. I am focused. I'm still on the bill and thanking the members for their support. And again, I always make reference and I refer you to read the Prime Minister's budget address on pages 47 until 54, where you will find all the measures that the Prime Minister and the government promised that they would deliver on as far as crime prevention and justice, all the way, and what the government has done in terms of the whole multi-pronged approach by equipping the policemen with equipment, proper housing, protective equipment. They've given them vehicles. They have trained additional policemen and other security officers at the correctional center, correctional facility. They're building a modern, and the whole idea is to build a modern system grounded in prevention, rehabilitation, and institutional strengthening. And I think this is what all this is about, what we are doing here. So I want to thank all of you for your contributions in support of this bill, Madam President. I now yield.
Senators, the question is that the plea bargaining bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as have a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to establish a system for plea bargaining and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Application.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 1, clauses 4 through to 24.
Plea bargaining and post-sentence plea bargaining.
Part 1, clauses 4 to 24 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 2, clauses 25 to 28.
Appeals.
Part 2, clauses 25 to 28 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 3, clauses 29 to 32.
Miscellaneous.
Part 3, clauses 29 to 32 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title and commencement.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the plea bargaining bill went through committee stage without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the plea bargaining bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Plea Bargaining Act 2026. This act comes into force on a date to be fixed by the Minister by order published in the Gazette.
Public business, motions. Senator Norbert.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise to present the following motion standing in my name. Motion on the adoption of the national motto in official ceremonial protocols. Whereas the national motto of St. Lucia, the land, the people, the light, embodies the core values, aspirations, and identity of the St. Lucian nation. And whereas national symbols serve not only as emblems of sovereignty, but also as instruments of fostering unity, patriotism, civic pride, and shared national consciousness. And whereas the consistent and visible use of national symbols in public life strengthens national identity, particularly among the youth. And whereas the national anthem and flag already form part of established ceremonial protocols, while the national motto, though widely recognized, remains underutilized in formal observations. And whereas there exists an opportunity to deepen civic engagement and national pride through the formal inclusion of the national motto in official proceedings, be it resolved that this Honorable Senate endorses the formal inclusion of the national motto, the land, the people, the light, as a standard component of official national ceremonies and state functions. And be it further resolved that the relevant government ministries and departments, including the ministry responsible for culture and the Ministry of Education, develop and implement a protocol for the respectful recitation of the national motto at appropriate public events. And be it further resolved that public education initiatives be undertaken to promote awareness and understanding of the meaning and significance of the national motto among citizens, particularly students. And be it further resolved that the government reports back to the Honorable Senate within 3 months on the development and implementation of the proposed ceremonial protocol. I so move, Madam President. Madam President, this motion is one that transcends party lines. It's one that promotes one of the symbols that will unite us as a nation. One of the symbols that strengthens this circle of togetherness that we have in this chamber. And patriotism needs no explanation, no marketing. The importance of patriotism to the development of a nation needs no selling points. All of us gathered here, Madam President, will agree that if we can foster a strong sense of patriotism in this country, pride for our country, pride for our people, for our land, many of the social ills we face today will see significant reduction in the occurrences. Littering, for example, Madam President. If people loved St. Lucia, and if we could get our young people to have so much pride in this country that they would be willing to die for this country, they would put country first, we would get a better crop of servicemen. We would get better teachers, better nurses, better police officers, better lawyers, better judges. We would get better politicians if we inculcate a love for this country that's so strong, it unites us across party lines, across religious lines, across gang membership. If we could all profess proudly, passionately, to one or two pledges, symbols, chants, mottos, we would love our fellow man more. Madam President, the rates of murder would decrease if we saw each other as more than just another human being walking the streets, but as another man who pledged the same pledge that we do, who chanted the same motto that we do, another man or woman that we see as our brother and sister as St. Lucians. This motion, Madam President, is to help St. Lucia rise, is to help define what it means to be a St. Lucian, what identifies us as one people, our motto. And I know we have the flag, I know we sing the anthem, although we sing the first verse of the anthem too often than we do singing the entire anthem. We need
Correction.
Yes.
That does not happen anymore.
Okay.
Please correct that. Please retract that.
So I retract the singing. But I know we
No. Say it properly. You retract the statement that says that we only sing the first verse
So I
of the national
retract the
anthem.
statement that say we only sing the first verse of the national anthem, because
Thank
that
you.
should not happen. If we're singing, we have to sing all 3 verses.
Senator, I have intervened and said to you that has stopped years
retracted
ago.
it,
So right, but you continue to say if we singing, we should sing the first, but it doesn't happen.
Correct.
So
but if
continue.
we sing in the national anthem, we sing. Do we sing the national anthem? Yes. And we sing all 3 verses.
All
What am I
3.
saying that's incorrect?
You are continuing, if we sing, we should sing the all 3, but it's not being done anymore. So move on.
When we sing the national anthem, we sing all 3 verses. And that's the type of pride we need to have. When we hear the words, the land, the people, the light, we should have that sense of calling. And that's why a law was taken to ensure that we sing all 3 verses, because we realized these practices were taken away from the patriotism that we should be inculcating in our people. Some persons are not sure what the light represents in our motto. I have heard, Senator Jean is not the flambeau. I have heard the flambeau, because we know that the United Workers' Party built this nation from Sir John, the father of the nation, that's celebrated by both parties today. And so many people think that the light represents the flambeau, but it's not. Some people say that it's the sunlight, the abundance of sunlight. And some people also say that it's the brilliance of our people, the creativity of our people. That's what the light represents. Either way, Madam President, the light, the people, the land, all of these represent the resources that we are to invest in as a government, as a nation. The people, we hear talk of putting people first. But if we focus on who these individuals are, the talents that they have, the aspirations that they have, and we seek to inculcate in them the necessary skills and the right attitudes that they should have to be the ideal St. Lucian citizen, we will not be seeking to pass laws to control their behaviors because they would be behaving in a manner that is pleasing to all of us. Train a child in the way that he must go, he will not depart in his ways. If we want our people to love our country, we have to start training them, inculcating that love from small. We almost have to brainwash our children to love our mother country. Growing up as a Cub Scout, I remember being drilled. You had to say this poem every day. A Cub Scout always does his best, think of others before himself, and does a good turn every day. And when I became a teacher, I had my students saying it every class. I will always do my best, think of others before myself, and do a good turn every day. And when you keep saying these things, they become part of you. That is why, Madam President, because of repeating this pledge, this motto, like what I'm advocating for today, that is why I'm able to think of others before myself. I read a petition here today on behalf of the people of Micoud North. Not because as a driver I want more speed bumps on the road. No, I hardly walk. I personally did not even want speed bumps. But I want it for the people who it will make feel safe when they cross the roads. The elderly, the parents who send their children to the shop. Think of others before yourselves. And I'm not just talking about survival. No, they will tell you, save yourself first before you can save others. Put on your mask on the airplane first. But in service, you must think of others before yourself. I developed this attitude from reciting a motto, a poem, a pledge. And Madam President, if we, government senators, representatives of the St. Lucia Labour Party, independent senators, representatives of the United Workers' Party, all parliamentarians want to see St. Lucians unite, focus on their resources, come together to help build patriotism. I know that my fellow senators here will have no difficulty in supporting this motion. Yesterday, Madam President, was International Day of the Youth. The theme, which is what I focus on, for International Youth Day, different contexts, common aspirations, different contexts. Whether we come from government side, opposition side, or independent, we will agree. Our common aspiration is to make St. Lucia a better place, is to leave St. Lucia better than we found it. To make St. Lucians love St. Lucia, love, oh love, our island home. Love the land that gave us birth. Let us call out its name. Let us sing our anthem. Let us recite the pledge. And let us chant our national motto with pride and dignity. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Prevo.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I stand to support this motion by Senator Norbert.
It's either you second the motion or you support. What is it you're doing?
I second the motion, Madam President.
Okay, so you second the motion, so you can sit now.
Thank you. I second the motion.
You can have your seat.
Thank you.
Senators, the question is that this Honorable Senate endorses the formal inclusion of the national motto, the land, the people, the light, as a standard component of official national ceremonies and state functions. And be it further resolved that the relevant government ministries and departments, including the ministry responsible for culture and the Ministry of Education, develop and implement a protocol for the respectful recitation of the national motto at appropriate public events. And be it further resolved that public education initiatives be undertaken to promote awareness and understanding of the meaning and significance of the national motto among citizens, particularly students. And be it further resolved that the government reports back to the Honorable Senate within 3 months on the development and implementation of the proposed ceremonial protocol. Senator Prevost.
Madam President, thank you very much, and excuse my exuberance in wanting to contribute to this very important motion. You know, it's not often we get to I haven't spent many sessions in this honorable chamber in the Senate, this being my 3rd session here, but motions like that I have not seen often. But I think where we are at the juncture we are in our country's development, given, and we heard today Senator Jean, leader of government business, just a short moment ago, spoke on a number of initiatives looking at a holistic approach to dealing with the matter of crime and criminality and justice. And we heard Senator Poyot speak eloquently on the need for prevention as opposed to cure. And when I heard those words from government senators, and I agree with them, it tells me that we need to draw on all strategies, all possible angles to help build our country and make our country a safe place, a place where we want to live, work, and play. And this happens, Madam President, by first having a body politic, a body of persons who respect each other, who love each other, a body of persons who can identify with something that is theirs, that they can all rally around, a body politic that believes in something bigger than myself. And what we have today as this motion seeks to rally every solution, but very importantly, the youth, the young ones, whose minds we have the opportunity to create a framework. And I'm sure Senator Poyot, as the expert teacher here, will tell you, when you are able to inculcate ideas at a young age and you're able to repeat it over and over, it stands a greater chance of taking root. So what we're proposing here today is the introduction in our education system, in our cultural system, in our normal course of life, an aspect that is already part of our national psyche, our motto. We're looking at having this Senate propose and have put to our country that this motto become an integral part of the identification of us as St. Lucians. And Madam President, I think this can do no harm. I see no harm being done. I don't see us as a nation being any worse off by having this motto, having the motion adopted by the Senate. It creates no harm. It does no wrong. It reinforces what is right. It does everything we expect. It does what we expect to be done in a nation that is rising, that is maturing, that is growing. And Madam President, in our discussions even prior to the Senate, while senators were sitting and reflecting on the bills to be discussed this morning, we were identifying possible areas and interventions that could be entertained at the national level to build and strengthen national resolve, to build and strengthen a community approach to many problems we have. And one of the main problems we identified was the problem of indiscipline, the lack of discipline. From driving on the road, respecting our laws, And we see that happening day in, day out. And we see an increasing trend towards this lack of discipline. And therefore, it behoves us to find every possible means of making interventions that builds discipline, that builds commitment to country, that builds commitment to each other. And our national motto does that. It takes us back to who we are. Our country is about the people. Our country is about the land from which we spring. Our country is about the light, the future. Saint Lucia, light. And therefore, our motto in itself already is an inspiration. It's an inspiration if we use it well, if we market it well, if we promote it well. It can be one other tool to helping us identify ourselves better as St. Lucians and help address some of the deviant behavior we see in our society. So, Madam President, you may want to describe that as one of the softer approaches to nation building. A softer approach to nation building, but an important approach to nation building. And I think Senator Norbert is absolutely correct. When you are a scout, when you are a Cub Scout and you become a scout, you become a cadet, as you grow and you begin to recite certain words, it's like your school anthem. Whether you're an SMC boy or Cassius Comprehensive boy, that school anthem, or St. Aloysius RC boy, or Barbados Primary Secondary School, Barbados Primary boy. Your school theme, your school motto, your school anthem, these become embedded in you. And this is, I believe, what this motion is seeking to do. It is seeking to have embedded in our people's psyche a respect and appreciation for ourselves. The people, the land, and the light that we are by our very name, St. Lucia. So, I see no harm. I see no damage. I see no downside to this motion being supported. In fact, I see positives. I see upsides to it. I see it being used to reinforce our culture. Because a lot of our culture, and Senator Ember Charles is here, one of the persons we know very close to our culture, whether in Creole form or otherwise. If you listen to our stories in our culture, if you listen to our music, it is reinforcing the land, the people, the light. That's what it is doing. It's about us. So I see this proposal here, this motion here, as seeking to formally put this on our school curriculum, in our school system, in our youth groups, in our churches, putting this in our official government processes so that it becomes a repeated standard approach that will hopefully contribute to building a St. Lucia, building an identity, helping us become prouder as a people, helping us unite with purpose, because we are all St. Lucians at the end of the day. And we will not be able to advance that idea of St. Lucian if there are not conscious measures taken to increase that. I note, Madam President, that in my days at school, civics was a very important aspect. Unfortunately, I don't see civics being taught in schools in the same manner as when I was young. And I don't know if there is any correlation, Senator Poyot, between the lack of teaching of this and the indiscipline we're seeing. I don't know. Maybe there is some research you would have done that would point to some of that. But I think we really need to explore every avenue, including this avenue, in helping to bring greater pride in our country and a greater sense of St. Lucianness. So, Madam President, with those words, I stand in support of this motion, and I commend it to all members of the Senate to support, as we all make our small contributions to helping build our St. Lucia. I thank you.
Senator Fede.
Thank you, Madam President. I stand to give my unwavering support, Madam President, to this motion. But before I register my comments, I would like to commend Senator Norbert for his legislative creativity. Madam President, I think we would have to go back some time to remember a day when a bill in recent times would have come from the Senate. The normal passage or pathway of motions would actually come from the lower house up into the upper chamber, and I would like to commend Senator Norbert for utilizing the constitutional right that is available to all senators to bring motions to the Parliament in the best interest of the people and in the best interest of the country. So for that, Senator Norbert, I would like to personally take some time to commend you and for your own vigor towards this endeavor. Senator Norbert, Madam President, is a very staunch advocate of patriotism and the national symbols of the country. In fact, I can tell you, Madam President, my own personal dealings with him, in that he is a politician of extraordinary uniqueness. And what do I mean by that? During the campaign that he just ran, in his bid to be the Member of Parliament for Micoud North, the Land, the People, the Light, was very much part of his lexicon and was very much part of who he was and what he believed in, and was very much an expression of his great patriotism and love for country and his fellow humanity. So, Madam President, I commend the Senator for his passion, for his courage, and for his perseverance to bring two different pieces of legislation to the House, one petition and a motion to the Senate floor. So that's commendable. I know, Madam President, that it sets a great example for many other senators to actually sponsor other pieces of legislation in the House. Madam President, this is unique, and this can sometimes cause governments to feel uncomfortable, because normally so much of legislative making is brought by governments and not to the floor by opposition senators or legislators. And that can sometimes make government members of either chamber of any parliament feel very uncomfortable because it's not the norm. But, you know, I think the most extraordinary things are not normal things, and which is why today I am full of commendation for my senatorial colleague, and I would like to commend him. Madam President, national mottos, they act as a symbolic anchor for public unity, guiding citizens and defining the moral or political character of the state on official seals, currency, and documents. Madam President, I note that in the United States, they have actually passed as law their national motto, "In God We Trust," back in 1956. Now, one might say, why is he going all the way to the United States? But I draw this example that they take their motto so seriously that they made a point of passing it into law under President Eisenhower in 1956. And so we see that the Americans, through awareness, through different means, have gone all out to make sure that their national motto is embedded in the hearts and in the minds and in the souls of members of their country, of citizens of their country. Madam President, we see as a new nation right here in the Caribbean, Jamaica had a national motto which read, "The Indian twain shall serve the Lord." And in 1962, when a new nation was born at its independence, it changed it to "out of many, one people."
Popular.
Again, Madam President, we're seeing a significant symbol by a country where they're saying that we are now in a new dispensation. We have a new constitution. We have a new existence. We are a new people, and therefore we need a new symbol, a new motto, a new credo, a new way going forward. And they have said, look, we would like one that depicts a common sense of purpose, out of many, one people. Madam President, I always admire at the Olympics when I see our athletes flying our national flag, and I see the sense of pride that they feel. Madam President, I love when I watch global events like World Cup football, and I see athletes singing their national anthem. I also, Madam President, do admire how some people are so patriotic that as ordinary fans, when their national team loses a sporting event to another country, that it follows by tears and by agony and by depression. I admire as well, Madam President, those schools spoken about here today that make it a duty to recite their motto, that in an effort to build value systems in their students. And how those students, Madam President, regardless of where they go in life and regardless of how old they become, how they are able to remember those mottos from those schools, and how that the motto has been a symbol of togetherness, of uniting them, of making them distinguish themselves as a common breed, as a common people. Madam President, I support this motion wholeheartedly because this motion is critical. And the motion, Madam President, what it seeks to do is to really do a lot more than we're doing now. And some might say, well, where is Elijah Norbert going with this motion, wasting our time? But it is important, Madam President. It is important that we make a point to say that we need to do more, that we need to do a better job at promoting our national motto, the land, the people, the light. Madam President, companies, to distinguish themselves, they use mottos, slogans. Apple, a world leader, says, think different. Nike says, just do it. BMW says, the ultimate driving machine. And St. Lucia is the land, the people, the light. So, Madam President, I know that we all know it well. And I know that because of the simplicity of it, we can take the significance of it for granted. And I want to thank Senator Norbert for really reminding all of us how serious this is. And I want to thank him, Madam President, for elevating this towards the national parliament for debate and discussion and for further action, hopefully. I hope, Madam President, that today we can put the political differences aside and we can look beyond who brought the motion and to deal with the fact that the motion is an important motion and is a significant motion, and everything we can do as legislators, as citizens of the country, to ensure that our national motto, a symbol of great national pride, is more effectively promoted. I think we should do everything within our power to ensure that that intent and that aspiration and that goal is done. Madam President, I commend Senator Norbert for bringing the motion as I sit, and I thank you for your indulgence.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam President. Just following on from some of what my colleague Senator said, I think we do need to commend Senator Norbert for his diligence and perseverance in getting this on. I know from the first time he came into the chamber, the motto has meant something personal to him, and he has wanted to bring this forward. That being said, I'm not sure that I understand fully the intent and the purpose of the motion. And perhaps in his rebuttal or if a response, if that is permitted, he can give a little bit further explanation. I understand the rhetoric about making it more commonly used, I assume, but I'm not sure exactly what the aim and how we're going to be achieving that. And in some ways, I think perhaps he's been a little not ambitious enough with the motion. I think there does need to be a discussion generally about national symbols, how they're treated, how they're used, when they're used, the proper protocols surrounding them. For example, I'm still not sure that as yet there's been a published guide to the flag, for example, establishing exactly what the Pantone or the RGB colors are to be used. You are still seeing different sized flags, the proportions are not always the same, the colors are not always the same. I know we get told cerulean blue, but cerulean blue is a name, but not necessarily every manufacturer will have exactly the same composition for cerulean blue, for example. So I think we need to go beyond that and ensure that we structure and properly identify the elements of all of the colors of our flag, determine exactly what the sizes are to be and how they can be used and in what shapes. Similarly, the coat of arms, I think perhaps we need just to put out a guide. There may be one. I'm not professing full knowledge as regards that, but I think again we need to publicize a little bit more and make sure that persons understand what the national symbols are and how they're to be used. For example, going back to the flag, you see persons flying tattered flags. You see persons dragging the flag behind them along on the ground. You see persons putting flags on their vehicles in ways I think are inappropriate, but maybe they're not. But we need to, as a whole, I think, have a discussion around these national symbols and agree to the manner in which they're to be used, how they're to be produced, and the specifications around them. But as I said, I'm not sure exactly how the motto would fit into that, and perhaps my colleague can do a little bit more in terms of explaining exactly how he envisages us repeating the motto will achieve the aims of national pride that he's seeking. I do believe that the motto is taught at schools. I think I did learn it whilst I was at school. I'm not sure the national pledge existed when I was at school, so perhaps I haven't learned that. And that's something I think, perhaps again, as part of the discussion, when do we use the national pledge? Is it necessary to say it? When is it necessary to say it? Ensuring that persons have a firmer grasp of that aspect of our national symbol. So as I said, I think he was a little bit unambitious, I think, and that's not, no offense meant by the use of the word unambitious, but I think there's a wider discussion surrounding the national symbols and how they are used, rather than just focusing only on the national motto. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator De Turville.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I'm still trying to figure out exactly where to start. I think I'll actually commend Senator Norbert for trying. He really did try. But I'm not sure. I remember him continuously saying that as legislators, we have the power to do this and we have the power to do that, and we must understand our power. We really need to understand our power as legislators. And I think this is a perfect example of legislative micromanagement. We have quite a few national symbols. If I'm not mistaken, there are about 8 or 9, including the flag, including the anthem, including the motto. And all 3 of the senators on the other side mentioned the rightful place, which I think is our schools. And that has been happening for many years. I think all of us have gone through the school system and learned a lot about what our symbols are. And I think that needs to be continued at the school level. And maybe when the Senator Norbert was a teacher, I'm not sure, maybe he didn't have the opportunity to teach it as much as he would like. And so he, in an effort to try to ensure that this continues, he brings it to the Senate. But I think it may not, I don't think the Senate may passing this or legislating on this is the proper way to do it. Just for example, Madam President, what happens to the other symbols? What happens to our calabash and our bamboo? Are we going to legislate as well how we use it and when it is planted, and ask citizens to ensure that we show national pride that these things are planted? If you take instances, you have the bird, you have the flower festivals. Are we supposed to recite Vive la Rose and Vive la Marguerite along with the motto when the anthem is being sung? Time and place. These 8 symbols are very important to all of us as St. Lucians. And there are ways to show national pride. In recent times during independence, you could see the increase in national pride of St. Lucians. The way they wear the colors, you see Journée Creole. These are not things that are necessarily legislated, but yes, I would agree that we need to learn and understand what they mean. And the perfect place for that is to the schools. For me, it is compulsory, highlighting the motto, making the motto compulsory, does not show, in my view, patriotism, but it just creates compliance. And I'm not sure that is what you want to do with the national symbols. Another thing that I would like to highlight is that when we speak about having national pride, it's important how we show it. And in recent times, we've had very unusual incidents of persons purporting to have national pride and really dragging the name of our country. And that in itself is not what we want to promote. If you're talking about national pride, writing to friendly governments and organizations that assist us in many ways to bring issues or perceived issues that most times in the way that they are formatted are not necessarily true, that doesn't show national pride, Madam President. destroying the country's name outside of our shores to prove a point, that doesn't show national pride at all. And in order for us to be able to understand what it means to be St. Lucian, it shouldn't necessarily be legislated. I think this is something that we need to take through the schools as it's rightfully done now. Increase it, have public service announcements. I remember back in the day, you know, the public service announcements where you have the say no to drugs was one of those that I remember very well. There were little slogans, there were songs, there were competitions. We can do it in those ways, but again, I understand Senator Norbert trying to make his mark. Again, commending him for it, but I don't support the motion as he has placed it. I think that there are other ways and means of having St. Lucians understand what their national symbols are, and to mandate that it's been said at, and then again, with him suggesting it being said at public and civic functions, what are these public and civil functions? How are we going to implement it? There's a lot that has been left out that does not make it, it's not very succinct. And so maybe if he can sit and consider a few things that have been said by the by all of the senators here in good faith. I don't think anybody is critical, you know, of him and his suggestion, but that he brings a little more thought to what he's trying to express in this motion. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Dr. Poyot.
Yes, Madam President, I rise to speak to the motion presented by Senator Elijah Norbert. I think this motion has actually sent me back into lecture mode, teaching mode. And there are many lessons we learn, and we learn from each other. And I commend Senator Norbert for his attempt at introducing something at the Senate, a motion at the Senate, and maybe trying to influence policy. But Madam President, I say in the lecture mode because I recall a few years ago, I had the privilege of teaching policy development to teacher union leaders in the Caribbean. And they were very excited after the lesson. So maybe I can share a little bit of that lesson with Senator Norbert. When you develop policy, and for policy to be accepted by the masses, there are two ways you can address policy. One, you can do it from top down, or you can do it from bottom up. And what the literature says about policy development, it is better you develop policy from bottom up rather than top down. And I have heard statements from my fellow senators on the other side that speaks about some legislation that comes here, and they ask whether there was broad consultation, whether there was discussion with the people, and how we arrive at it here. And government had to defend itself and say, yes, we had meetings, we had discussions, we had everything, so that before it becomes law, then people have bought into it. And that is the lesson that will come from this. This, I can ask Senator Norbert, how long has this motto been around? I assume it's from 1979, from independence, or is it a little later? So it has been around for decades. And today, we want to come in the House and say it must be recited at every public function. Something starts at one day it has to start. But we are asking why it took so long for us to make it policy. What was holding it back? It's because there has not been the popular buy-in as was articulated by Senator de Turville in the schools, among the youth, in the public domain. People have not bought into, because they have bought into the national anthem, they have bought into the flag, and so on. So we need to find ways of getting them to buy into saying the land, the people, and the light. And maybe we'll make better use of the land. Maybe our people will be more proactive, more energized, and maybe they'll see greater light in their life. We don't know what will come out of it. So my suggestion, Madam President, is that this motion has to go down to the ground so that we start bottom up. So I'm challenging Senator Norbert to go down to the ground and show the level of mobilization where people are going to say, we want it, we want it. And everybody will be paying attention. They start practicing it, even if it's not law, even though it wasn't passed in this house, but they begin to practice it. And that's why they said, it's practice that boils down to policy. There are things people are against, but after everybody is doing it, then it becomes policy. Government has no choice but to make it a policy or make it a law, because they are not going to change anything. That's what they do, that's what they want, that's how, and they agitate for it. The majority wants it, it will go. So I'm saying the issue of national pride, it does not come overnight. It doesn't come because you just pass a law. You don't have to police it. You don't have to force it down the people's throat. They have to accept it. They have to embrace it. And we have to find ways of getting them to embrace the land, the people of light, at national functions. All of us are saying that. That's how I see it. And I believe in nationalism. I believe in national pride. And I recall it has been almost all my years working with the teachers union. We navigate in the region among 30 teachers union. We would have our differences here, but when we leave St. Lucia, we are one. We don't go out there and split ourselves and so on. And anybody who tries to damage the reputation of St. Lucia, a St. Lucian who tries to damage the reputation of St. Lucia, I have concerns about that. Because we are talking about the land, we are talking about the people, we're talking about the light. We are supposed to be one. And I will not use some of the expressions because I hear about united, and sometimes the people are not united, yet they said they are united. You know, so I don't want to use that word too often. But the idea of a motto could be something people rally around. It energizes them. It gives them a sense of purpose. For example, in the Caribbean Union of Teachers, their motto is all for each and each for all. So people chant that and they take pride in that. So if we take pride in the land, the people, and the light, we don't have somebody to tell us to do it. We will do it. Because we take pride in our land. We take pride in our people. We take pride in getting the light and bringing things forward. So we have to find creative ways of getting this to be policy in terms of practice before it is even written as you must do it. Because if we try to force people to do things because we came in the house and we put it there and we think automatically they'll just start doing it, well, I'm saying we'll have a bigger challenge on our hand. And as Senator de Turville indicated, there are so many national symbols. Are we tackling all the national symbols, or is just that one we are concerned about? We have the flag, the national anthem, the national wear, the coat of arms, the pledge, the motto, national plant, national bird, national flowers. Why one so important than the other? All our national must have the same kind of importance as we move in terms of national events, where in culture we bring the cultural part, in education and so on. And the issue of the youth, you grow the seed and then the plant gets big. So we have to start. Now, I don't want to challenge Senator Norbert directly, but I know, having been a teacher, I don't know to what extent he labored out there to try and sell that concept in his own school or in his district or among the schools. I don't know. I don't know how much progress you made in that area. maybe you can share some of that with us, and we can replicate it in all the education districts, and then in youth organizations and the National Youth Council, and so on. And then the others, if you think the others are taboo and they're not interested, they have no choice, because the young people are rallying around that, and it's a movement. Make it a movement. I challenge you to make it your champion project and your movement, and then everybody will rally around you. And Senator Preville also spoke about youth and the young people. Let's get them around the concept. I have no objection to promoting our land, our people, our light, but we have to do it the right way. We start the base, mobilize the base, and even the government ministers must be sensitized around that too. We might come here in the Senate and say we made it, let's push it down the throat. And when it reaches down there, they say, well, so what's that? Even they are not sensitized. So where are we moving with that? So we are saying everybody should be on board. If it is a good idea, it's a good concept, let us do it together as one people. So it is not what is done, but it's more how it is done. And I think you need to revisit the approach in arriving at the objective that you are trying to succeed in. And I don't think I can elaborate a little more, but to indicate that this motion can be addressed, but it has to be done the right way. That's my position on that. I thank you, Madam President.
Senate Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, good day to everybody again. And I had thought that I would not have joined this discussion or the debate, but whenever you speak of these matters, it reminds me of a late comrade, brother, and honorable former member of this House, in the person of the late Dr. Vellon L. John, who once, and he was very passionate about national symbols, emblems, etc., and even to the point of us becoming a republic. Unfortunately, he didn't see that before his terrestrial demise. But he wrote, "To be sane in a world of insanity is insanity. Hence the wisdom of my world is madness." And that was a bookmarker in his book, Ramblings of a Mind and Pulsations of a Heart, Dr. Vellon L. John. And here's a little note that he has in there called Ego. And it goes like this, Madam President. A scrambler of words, a map leaper to a star, an unfeathered biped, with a soul that contradicts. The concoction is madness. Madam President, the land, the people, and the light is enshrined on the coat of arms of St. Lucia. If you look up here to your back, Madam President, the coat of arms is right here in our parliament. A distinguished piece of work. It was designed by Sidney Bagshaw. It carries the Tudor rose to represent England, the fleur-de-lis to represent France, the stool to represent Africa, the torch, beacon to light the path. Unfortunately, at that time, it wasn't the Labour Party, so you see there's a torch. St. Lucia, the Amazona versicolor, that is the national bird. And it's not another person who travels frequently. The motto, the land, the people, and the light. And that is enshrined on the coat of arms. It is displayed on a ribbon in the bottom, and it is part of the coat of arms. The shield signifying the island's natural resources, diverse population, and future wisdom. So, Madam President, the coat of arms, when I was a little boy going to Vidbutai Government Combined School at La Clery, it was, the flag then was the Union Jack. And I remember in 1967, again, we got rock cake and juicy because we had to line up the George V Park because there was a very important person from the United Kingdom who came down, and we had to say, God save the Queen. And then we changed that and we became an associated state, and then Bagshaw then designed this coat of arms in 1967. For those of you who do not know where that came from. And then in 1979, we received our independence. We fought fight though. A lot of battles took place in this very chamber about independence and the mode of getting to it. But it's not that people didn't want it. It has happened, and here we are, 40-something years later. What's it? 47 years later. And the coat of arms, when we became an associated state, the country agreed to retain it. So we didn't put a new flag, no, we didn't come with a new coat of arms. So it's there. Every letterhead you receive from the government of St. Lucia has the coat of arms. So it is not the St. Lucian parrot, or the fleur-de-lis, or the torch, or some other inscription on the coat of arms. It is the coat of arms. And some of our honorable members, our senators here, are wearing the coat of arms and their shirts on their pins. Okay? So that is well established. We know that. And I don't know that we have any less national pride. Because I can stand here and say, with God as my guide, I pledge allegiance to my country, St. Lucia. I proclaim that I will serve my country with pride and dignity and defend it with vigor and valor in the pursuit of excellence, justice, and excellence, and equality for all. Right? The school children know that, The school children know all about that. So, we, I believe, can deal a lot more on national pride by, I think, and I would encourage the senator, because charity begins at home, and I would encourage the senator to begin the process of teaching some national pride to some of his comrades and colleagues, because there are some of them who have become purveyors of letters or couriers of letters to high commissions and embassies, and purveyors of innuendos, etc., to discredit institutions and the work of the government of St. Lucia. That is not national pride. And this is where we should begin in the process. We have to take this seriously. We can have our battles in here, we can have our battles on the streets, but we must not take this to the international community and try to discredit our country when we are trying to burn down our country because we want to govern. That is not national pride, Madam President. And when some were trying
Madam President, I rise on a point of order. I rise on a point of order, Madam President.
What is your point of order, Senator?
The member is imputing improper motives to member, to the actions of the senators on this side. It's not because we write letters means that we want to destroy the reputation of the country. He's making that assumption. That's not the motive for the letters.
Proceed, Senator. It's on his desk. Just let him proceed. You can just take it. Yeah, he mentioned.
Madam President, I just thought I should add that little bit, but I think in another place and another space and time, as some of my colleagues have suggested, that we can sit, and I think there's a process that is ongoing to deal with this Constitution of St. Lucia, and I think there's an appropriate place where we will treat with that matter, or we ought to treat with that matter. But I think it is something that we have to consider when we speak of national pride. But the coat of arms, I think, carries that. And it was at some point at the 25th anniversary of the independence of St. Lucia that we did get cabinet to approve of the national pledge. Because previous to that, it was a national pledge that was adopted from some other place which did not belong to us, and we didn't have the intellectual property rights on that. So we had a competition, and again, as suggested by Senator Poyot, there was a competition. So it brought the people together to come up with a way of developing a new national pledge. And so we have our national flag, and we have seen winners. We have the big rally we have around the island annually at Independence. And what better ways that we have used to galvanize national pride. We have seen it in our art forms with our athletes everywhere. So, Madam President, I think that motion, I don't think it is where we should be debating this at this stage, and I think I rest now. Madam President, I just want to bring to the Senate's attention that Standing Order 9.93, which prohibits the Senate from sitting between 6 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. And I would humbly move for the suspension of Standing Order 9.3 to enable the Senate to sit beyond the prescribed time of 6 o'clock this afternoon.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 9.3 be suspended to allow the Senate to sit beyond the time of 6 in the evening. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion, say aye. As many as of that a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Since there are no more presentations, I will call on Senator Norbert to rebut.
Oh, thank you, Madam President. Quite a number of points to respond to. First of all, Madam President, I want to thank all the senators for their contribution this afternoon. Senator Lee, I am grateful for the advice through you, Madam Chair, Madam President, that was proposed. And I did feel like I could have done more. I could have, as Senator de Turville assumed that I was doing, try to micromanage how exactly it is that we should show some more reverence and respect and promote the motto. But I decided to move a motion instead of trying to formulate a bill, because I did not want to dictate to the ministries or to the people of St. Lucia what it is that we should do when it comes to showing that level of respect for our motto. If you notice the second resolution here in the motion, it says, be it further resolved that the relevant government ministries and departments, so I'm leaving it up to the relevant government ministries and departments, including Ministry of Education, to develop and implement a protocol for the respectful recitation of the national motto. It's something that we do not have. We do not have a protocol for the respectful recitation of the national motto. I know we carry it on our chest, all government workers, we have the coat of arms, some persons did not even know that the words "the land, the people, the light" were being carried on their chest. Some persons were ridiculing the motto recently while having the coat of arms pinned to their chest. We see that in the public. But as a senator, I'm in no position to say exactly what we should do and how we should do it, which is why I also said in the other resolution that follows that public education initiatives be undertaken to promote awareness and understanding. We should engage with the public. Senator Poyot mentioned the bottom-up approach. And this is what I am asking that we do. I do not want to stand here and say we must put our hands to our sides and shout "the land, the people, the light" 3 times. I'm not in a position to micromanage. So, Senator de Turville, nice of you for coming back in. I am not trying to micromanage what we do to show reverence to the national motto. What I do know, Senator de Turville, is that when we shout "Vive la Rose," it triggers a greater response than when we shout "the land, the people, the light." And La Rose has its opponent, La Marguerite. So if you shout "Vive la Rose" in a room, the Marguerites will not respond. But the motto unites all of us. And I know that some of us know by heart. Maybe the older ones in the room remember probably chanting "Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité," the motto of France. And "In God we trust." We all know these popular mottos. We sing "Out of many, one people." All of these are national mottos that we have come to learn and identify with somewhat. But it's not ours. Our national motto is what I'm asking. I'm moving a motion that the relevant government ministries and departments, they come to us in 3 months, not next week. Take some time and decide on how we should show more reverence to our motto, how we should use it at national events, after public education initiatives, after promoting awareness and the understanding and meaning and significance. Because we are all right. I heard the senator say that we were taught this in school. But like many things in school, we learn it just to pass the exams and then we forget it. But is our national motto something we should stop using after we graduate? Is our national anthem something we should stop using after we graduate? And I agree. A lot more has to be done with all our national symbols. Painted all over the place, printed, the words, the land, the people, the light should be more prominent in our society. I don't know how many of you have been to Cuba. If you go to the movies, the theater, you have to sing the anthem before the movie starts. You go to Jamaica, intermission, all rise for the national anthem of Jamaica. You came to watch a movie, you know, and you have to sing the anthem. You see the pictures of the national symbols. They promote that sense of pride, and you can see the results. Trinidad, Barbados, and you can see how well they represent their islands. When you have the opening ceremony of sports, watch the size of their delegation with their flags. But when they called St. Lucia recently, I only saw one man waving a flag, a St. Lucian flag, and that man is not even St. Lucian. That man was from a country not too far from us. Correct, a Caribbean man. So how is it that Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, Guyana could show, Grenada, that level of pride while we stop saying our pledge, our motto in school as soon as we graduated? So I'm not proposing exactly what we should do. I am moving a motion that the relevant authority, the relevant ministries, after public consultation, comes back to us and discuss with us or propose what should be done to show that reverence. Now, I would like to quote the words shared with us by the leader of government business from the late Sir Vellon John. I know, Madam President, that the wisdom of my words may sound like madness, but I hope that the explanation I have given concerning the micromanaging and not taking a bottom-up approach has landed on good soil, fertile soil. So the senators are a bit more clear. I'm not dictating what we should do. I'm asking the relevant ministries to take 3 months and decide what we should do. I want to humbly seek the indulgence through you, Madam President, of Senator Poyot, who said she would school me a bit. And I want to let her know that a motion is not a policy document. A bill is a policy document. A motion, which is what I'm moving now, is not a policy that I'm proposing. I'm just asking the relevant ministries with their policy makers, the leader of their ministries, to propose the policy. Maybe they can move a bill after their deliberations and decisions. They can come up with the protocol. I've recognized, like most of us have, that the level of patriotism in this country should be increased. And that if we are more patriotic, we'll work better together as a nation. And I'm asking the relevant departments to consider the protocol that will allow us to unite. I find it difficult to understand why we have not even united on this issue here in the Senate. My opening remarks, I said that I do not believe that I have to come here to sell patriotism. I do not believe I have to come here to sell the importance of the motto, a chant that we could all recite. You hear the Americans chanting, USA, 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 and you just sense the pride, the energy that fills up the people. You hear them chant, in God. When you say, in God we trust, the message that sends. When you hear the French take to the streets to demand justice and they shout, liberté, égalité, fraternité, it's a call to your citizenry throughout the length and breadth of your nation. Madam President, I believe it was Senator de Turville who said that we do not want to promote compliance. We shouldn't force respect for the national symbols. I think it is an offense not to stand at attention.
Senator de Turville?
Madam Senator, on a point of order, I think the Senator is misleading the House. That Madam President, I'm sorry. That is not what I said. And if he's going to quote, I suggest that he quotes verbatim. Thank you.
But you have not said what you said, Senator de Turville. You only said what you said he's misleading, that that's not what you said. Or what did you say?
Then I elaborated on it. Let me just find it and I will correct him. Yes, thank you, Madam.
Okay, Senator, proceed.
But I believe, Madam President, that it used to be an offense not to stand at attention when we sing the national anthem. I think you could be charged or probably arrested. We didn't ever saw that as forcing people to respect the national anthem, but it was the established protocol. And so that's what I'm asking the ministries to consider. If this government truly believes that our national symbols should be respected, then their representative senators here today will have no reservations in supporting a motion, not a bill, a motion. There's a difference between a motion and a bill. The bill would micromanage. The motion is just making a suggestion, a kind suggestion, that action be taken on the part of the government. Madam President, I would also like to respond to
Madam.
Senator de Turville.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to, again, on a point of order, with the Senator misleading the House, my words were that making a motto compulsory does not create patriotism, it just creates compliance.
Thank you. Proceed, Senator.
Right, Madam President. And so I respond to her comments. It just creates compliance. And what I'm saying is we have compliance measures for creating compliance when it comes to standing at attention for the national anthem and how we recite the pledge. You have to comply. And it's through the compliance all over the world. That's how you get to promote the patriotism. You do not have a choice but to love your country. In Russia, young men would strap back in the days when wars were being fought, they would fight to the death for murder Russia. For murder Russia. So I wear, beneath my shirt, blue, yellow, black, and white. That's what I wear. So today I have the white one. Again, keeping with the colors of the flag. So sometimes you'll see me for a yellow one, a white one, a blue one, or a black one. Any question you have, I will answer. I wish you'd do the same when I ask questions. In terms of what Senator Poyot said, Madam President, concerning patriotic people who write letters to international agencies, and I think Senator Jean added to embassies and ambassadors. Madam President, I was the chairman of the St. Lucia Labour Party appointed local council, and I came across some very concerning practices. I came across some matters that immediately I should have reported, but I patiently waited for the individuals to change their ways. I spoke to them, I showed them the laws, I called the police. When all of this failed, I called their parents, waiting patiently, keeping everything to myself. When evidence started mounting, showing up on social media, I had no choice. I brought it to the other members of the local council. Madam President, I got a call from the ministry responsible for the local council, and I was told, why haven't you written a letter? Because we know what you know, and if you do not write a letter, you will be an accomplice. I said, but I have been talking to him, I've been giving him chances, I've brought him in for counseling. I'm just being patient, waiting for a change in the behavior. And I was told in these exact words, Mr. Norbert, put pen to paper. I put pen to paper, and I became the monster in the room. Why did you have to write a letter? Why did you have to report? Now you got the man fired. The same thing is happening today, using patriotism, because someone says the land, the people, the light, but they go and they report wrongdoings that are in the public domain. The leader of the opposition had a responsibility to write to trusted institutions to let them know of suspicions and allegations. And let us not play politics with this. All of us in a supervisory position, whether we are assistant supervisors, we have a responsibility to make reports. And I learned that maybe 6 years ago. And maybe many of us, many St. Lucians are learning that today. That the leader of the opposition, if he did not write the letters, he would be an accomplice in what's going on in his country with the people's money. As a matter of fact, the SSDF was formed by us in Parliament. And as to why we have not formed a committee to get first-hand information, but we rely on news reports, the standing orders speak to us as senators, not even raising questions pertaining to matters in the news. We're not supposed to get our information from the news. We're not supposed to know since when. Wait for a news reporter to tell us when was the last time SSDF submitted a report to us as Parliament. the protectors of the Constitution. We formed the statutory bodies. How many statutory bodies have not produced reports? And now you will sit here. How many did y'all produce? Oh, so the UWP did not produce, so it's okay for y'all not to produce? This is ridiculous. How many have been tabled here? Madam President, this is embarrassing. I expect the local hack to speak like that, but not senators.
Madam President, on a point of order, are we speaking about
Senator, take your seat. You put on your light, I acknowledge you, then you stand. Leader of government business.
Madam President, on a point of order.
Your point of order, sir.
We are speaking about a motion presented by the Senator Norbert. And now he is going down another road. That is not in the motion. Motion, Madam President.
I acknowledge your comment, your intervention, Senator. Although one senator did speak to letters being written, however, Senator Norbert, I think you've been given sufficient time to respond to the issue of the letter being written, and so you can move on with your rebuttal putting into the motion.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd also hope, or if I could move a motion that we form a select committee, an SSDF oversight select committee, which is in keeping with the standing orders, so that we can provide proper oversight for our statutory bodies. In a mature democracy, you have select committees assigned to every ministry. What are we doing to ensure that the name of our country is not dragged in the gutters? What are we doing as senators? Madam President, I would like to hope that, like us, my fellow senators on the other side of the circle, along the same straight line that forms the circle, 360 degrees, an infinite number of sides, makes us one. I'd like to hope that they are mature enough to support any motion or any bill that will make St. Lucia better than we found it. This motion, Madam President, as I conclude, is asking the government of the day to consider taking action that will promote patriotism. I make no serious recommendations. All I'm asking is please consider it if you think the national motto is important. Patriotism is important. Bottom-up approach. Have public consultations. I had public consultations for the speed bump. I spoke to the previous PS in infrastructure. He agreed that when asphalt arrived on island, we would get the speed bumps. There was a change and then back to zero. Patriotism, Madam President.
Senator Jean.
Madam President, on a point of order, there's a motion about the land, the people, and the light. And now we're getting into a motion that we had dealt, a petition that was dealt with first thing this morning about speed bumps. I cannot tell you, Madam President, or give you instructions, but I'm just trying to find out where are we going with this motion. Thank you.
Senator Norbert, I have cautioned you before to speak to the motion, so I'm doing that again. You speak to the motion, which is the adoption of the motto, the land, the people, the light. Proceed.
Yes, Madam President, I was just responding to the final point here about the bottom-up approach. I was asked about...
No. I said to speak to the motion.
So I'm rebutting to what Senator Poyot said.
No, you brought in the issue of the petition.
So I was giving an example of...
Senator, just speak to the motion.
You're in charge. Okay, Madam President. So for this motion, where we are asking the government to take a bottom-up approach, like we have done for other matters that were brought to the House today, we pray that maturity prevails and that love for country prevails. Madam President, fellow senators, to those of you who are thinking about voting against this motion, I say, please do not make the national motto, please do not make the national motto a casualty of partisan politics. Please do not make respect for the national motto a casualty of partisan politics. I love you all, and I'd like to say good night and thank you very much, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that this Honorable Senate endorses the formal inclusion of the national motto, "The land, the people, the light," as a standard component of official national ceremonies and state functions. And be it further resolved that the relevant government ministries and departments, including the ministry responsible for culture and the Ministry of Education, develop and implement a protocol for the respectful recitation of the national motto at appropriate public events. And be it further resolved that public education initiatives be undertaken to promote awareness and understanding of the meaning and significance of the national motto among citizens, particularly students. And be it further resolved that the government reports back to the Honorable Senate within 3 months on the development and implementation of the proposed ceremonial protocol. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. No. Aye. I think the noes have it. We ask for a division. Okay, so Madam Clerk, so each senator will indicate the response.
Senator Charles, how do you vote?
I abstain.
Senator de Tillville, how do you vote?
No.
Senator Fede, how do you vote?
Yes.
Senator Dr. Harak Singh, how do you vote?
No.
Senator Goddard, how do you vote?
No.
Senator Jean, how do you vote?
No.
Senator Lee, how do you vote?
I also abstain.
Senator Norbert, how do you vote?
Aye.
Senator Perryville, how do you vote?
Aye.
Senator Poyot, how do you vote?
No.
So, Senators, the ayes, we have 3, 2 abstains, and 5 noes. So the motion does not move forward. Thank you, Senators. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned sine die.
Before I move the question, I want to thank you, Senators, for your participation today. I want to particularly thank those of you who paid tributes to our fallen sons of this great country. It was heartwarming to listen to you and provide more information about our brothers, Mr. Charlie, Evarista Jean-Marie, Windy Compton, and who was the fourth one? Terror, the mighty Terror. So I thank you so much for that. And don't forget to remember Senator Ferrapolius during this trying times with her family going through sickness and death. Yes, so I thank you so much for your participation today. And I think it was just, you did good, well, very good. I now move the question. Senators, the question is that this House do stand adjourned sine die. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. And thank you, officers and the team from NTN and everyone. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Michael, we come to the end of today's sitting of the Senate, otherwise referred to as the upper house of the Parliament of St. Lucia, the bicameral parliaments. And it may or may not be surprising that today's sitting of the Senate.
Madam Clerk in training. That's her second day being trained fully, and she's been doing very well. When she first started, it was a bit shaky, but I think she's getting the hang of it, and I want to commend you, and of course the new leader of government business. Thank you all. Yes.
So, Lucia sat in today as the leader of government business in the absence of Dr. Alison Jean, who is off island, and the acknowledgement of a new clerk of parliament in training, being acknowledged there right now. But as I was saying, Michael, it may or may not have been surprising that today's sitting of the Senate, which comprises 11 members, as opposed to the House of Assembly, which has 17 members, although it didn't have the full complement of 7. But today's Senate meeting went on much longer. It started earlier for sure, and it went on much longer than the House of Assembly did on Tuesday. But there's something that has to be noted. There was absolutely no opposition, only one opposition member elected in the House of Assembly. The leader of the opposition, leader of the UWP was not there, but all 3 of the opposition senators, the 2 independents were there. So the extent of discussion carried it through to right now where we are, fairly late in the evening. A special motion had to be passed to lawfully permit the Senate to continue the sitting past 6 p.m., which it did, and so we understand it from that context. Your take?
Oui, Shelton, ça nous aujourd'hui a conduit c'est temps qui est passé en Sénat là était trop plus long parce que ça qui est passé en Caïconsit côté en Caïconsit ni plus monde plus membre parlement pour discuter et aussi ou mentionner qui l'a tenu en démotion c'était en pétition par membre parlement excusez par sénateur, oui, sénateur Elisha Norbert, qui te discuté un peu. Mais pour moi, ça m'a trouvé intéressant. Première, peut-être que ça bien créole, c'est pétition, il était commandé pour plus sortir, ça c'est pour garder, pour mettre plus, ça à sous-chemin pour protéger ces mounins qui ont marché et traversé chemin à mi-cours, ça c'est en village Mikou avec place là puisqu'il dit l'année chez accident avec comme ça mais quand même ça pas passé puisqu'il pas l'autre face là tout le monde qui participe c'est ça qui supporter et deuxième il fait quand même dire pour en motion comme ça là pour demander pour gouvernement avec ministre différents monde pour adopter ça nous a que moto ça c'est moto c'est un désigne qui gouvernement même qu'on flag là avec l'autre bail national so moto c'est l'union equity un bail qui match the land ça c'est terre the people peuple avec the light ça c'est clair et qui voulait gouvernement avec ces ministres là mettez plus officiel avec servi plus en manière comme ça ça qui est intéressant Shelton c'est pas aujourd'hui il a dit ça depuis que ça il commencé à campaigner il a servi même bagage ça là avec il a mentionné ça mais l'autre façade là il expliqué raison il fait mais l'autre façade ça c'est ça façade gouvernement dit même pour les autres, l'autre, c'est pas seulement moto, c'est pas seulement ça, comme ça, c'est symbole national. Nous avons servi, il y a plusieurs autres symboles nationaux. Et qui ça n'a pas de significance pour mettre yon en haut l'autre. Avec il a gardé encore ses passions, c'est un gros passion pour symbole ça. Oui.
Thank you very much, Michael, for explaining to us about the two presentations by Opposition Senator Elisha Norbert. In fact, in the first one, a petition to the Senate on behalf of residents of Miku North for the immediate installation of speed control measures, and he referenced some very tragic accidents that have occurred. Well, the same can be said of other parts of St. Lucia. It is very interesting that he spoke specifically on behalf of the people of Miku North. He is not an MP in the elected sense. He is certainly not the MP for Miku North. Another Norbert holds that position and role in the other house, but that, as you say, was his passion. But we have to tell you that on this petition, which is what opened all the activities for today in the Senate, short shrift was made of it. The government side unanimously, and I suspect they may have been joined by the opposition, by the independents, although we can't be too sure. But the government senators were absolutely unanimous in their saying no to that they didn't allow it. The second one that he brought, which was the motion that you mentioned, there was a little bit of doubt because the two independent senators abstained. We know that all three of the opposition senators voted in support of their colleague, and so when the 5 government voices spoke, there was a call for the division of the vote to ensure, and it did turn out that yes, the 3 opposition senators voted yes, the 5 government senators voted no, and the 2 abstained, so it was really a 5-3, and then it ended up carrying. Other highlights of the day, well, just as we had in the House of Assembly on Tuesday, more than 50 statutory instruments, and they all had to be read and presented by the minister without portfolio, but minister in the office of the Prime Minister, Senator Dr. Chandali Haraksingh. She presented on behalf of the Prime Minister, on behalf of the Minister for Tourism and Deputy Prime Minister. She presented on behalf of the Minister of Health, Wellness and Nutrition, and she also presented on behalf of the Minister responsible for labor cooperatives, that's Honorable Emma Hippolyte. So quite a lot for Dr. Chandali Haraksingh, to really handle today. But the greatest set of discussion seemed to come on the income tax amendment, which was due for first reading, but a motion was moved to suspend the relevant standing orders to allow it to be dealt with in its entirety, and also the plea bargaining bill and so on, which are those that really took a lot of attention. On the matter of the plea bargaining, there seemed to be unanimous, agreement that it is useful legislation and so on, and so we didn't see any significant opposition pushback on this one. So very interesting day. There is a notion among people that the Senate is secondary and not so interesting and so on. When you actually come here and you observe the exchanges and you observe the inputs and interventions and so on, then you realize the Senate is just as interesting, it is just as gripping, as we might see, as the elected chamber of the House. Yes.
Ça qui a fait Sénat là, qui est intéressant, c'est qu'il a mis des gens qui sont indépendants. L'autre, ça nous dit chamber, c'est gouvernement et opposition. Mais
government and those who do not support the government.
Exactly.
Yes.
Alors nous avons what you can call anglais middle of the road. Côté nous avons différentes présentations. Mais généralement, c'était intéressant, bien intéressant aujourd'hui. Toutes ces sénateurs étaient là avec. Mais avant de dire ça, Shelton, j'ai trouvé était intéressant qui presque tous ces indépendants avec face à le gouvernement parlaient à ces trois et bien 4 personnes qui étaient passées avec eux, on a parlé à sur la vie, mais trouvé presque tout le monde, ça aussi pour un chaitan.
Oui, pour un chaitan. Et ça veut dire tout le monde devrait mettre mon souillot à ça. Est-ce que c'est un homme comme M. Everest Jean-Marie, c'est un homme qui est respecté, c'est un homme qui était connaît, qui était une bonne manière, et tout le monde, et c'est un homme qui était adressé bien poli, dignité, des bagages comme ça. So on chaque monde qui a changé. Calypsonian, Mighty Terra, on chaque monde qui a changé à ici ça expressement. So à ces monde là moins de tout
qui Mighty Terra c'est il gagne plusieurs fois même quand le peuple qui gagne plusieurs fois quand l'autre Calypsonian mais c'est yon moi que c'est le monde qui gagne plus passé c'est peuple.
Peut-être ça oui, mais il dit ça. Oui, so c'est monde on chaque temps passé à ça. Mais comme il m'a dit, les débat là les plus longs passé était dans le cahier concept là côté mon électé puis là tenait 3 membres opposition qui a parlé à ce presque toute bagarre qui est faite. Je dis M. Titus Preville qui a servi comme chef des affaires opposition dans le Sénat là, M. Dominique Fédé et puis M. Elisha Norbert. C'est mon ça nous ça dit pas quitter rien passé. Yo dit ça mais au cas où il y a des cas d'accord dans chaque bagaille. Peut-être qu'il y a des nous ça fait différent, nous ça manière différente. So nous voulons pas apologie et pour nous me parler créole en présence là. We want to apologize for the first part of the day which you were not able to hear from us. This is because of technical problems which were subsequently resolved after much effort, and we want to take our hats off to our technical team, to those who really worked, and I can tell you they were at it non-stop to resolve those problems with the sound, and finally they got it. And that is why maybe Michael and I are taking a little more time than we normally do at the end of the proceedings, because we recognize there was a deficit in terms of our presentation, in terms of our coverage, in terms of our delivery of this, and perhaps we owe a little more to that. So thank you very much for your patience. And so on behalf, I don't know if Michael has anything further to say, on behalf of him, on behalf of all of us here from the National Television Network and the St. Lucia FM 97.3, all parts of the Government Information Service, I'm Shelton Daniel, bidding you a very good Thursday evening until when we do this on another occasion to be announced and scheduled.